Hello, everybody, and welcome back to day 35 of the 100 Days of Making Comics Challenge. So, in this video, I'm going to be talking about ways that you can control the pacing of your webcomic or your comic scene. What was I saying? I'm just going to start that over a little bit. I'm going to be talking about ways that you can control the pacing of your comic on a page-by-page level, because I think that that's like an invisible indicator when it comes to reading comics. The time that it takes for a reader to go through a single page is how the reader will perceive the pace of the scene. Even if the way that you've written the scene is like slow, if you've written the scene to be like slowly paced, if you spread that scene out over multiple pages, it will feel faster than you intended. And the pacing in comics, it's easier and it's harder than pacing for like novels. And so I think that it's easier because when it comes to the expectation differences between a novel reader and a comic reader, the comic reader isn't so much aware of the pacing than a novel reader is, because I feel, okay, so this is my personal opinion, this is my theory, based on nothing but my own experience of reading comics, is that the pacing of a scene for a comic reader is much more invisible and not thought of, because the comic reader has the ability to take as long as they want on a page. Even if they've already read all of the dialogue or narrative, they can still linger on your panels if they want to look at it more. And so the page to page and panel to panel pacing isn't of like significance. Well, I mean, it's significant, but it's not as significant, not as set in stone, I guess is what I'm saying, as a novel would be. Because for a novel, unless a reader rereads something, rereads like a paragraph or a page because they didn't really like take any of the words in, or they're like confused and they're like, hold on, let me go back a bit. Unless they reread for that reason, they're not going to stop. There's nothing for them to stop for. It's all words. And so the only thing to do is to continue reading the next word. And so I guess when looking at it that way, novel pacing is much more at the mercy of the author, whereas comic pacing is controlled by the author, but the reader really has the fine-tuning reins in their hands, essentially. They're the ones who in the end really dictate how long it takes them or how fast it takes them to read it, because also the one thing about comics is that you don't, if you've made a good what is it? If you've drawn your page in such a way that allows the reader to get the gist of what the page is about, what's going on, without having to read any of the dialogue, then sometimes you'll get readers who just like skim over the dialogue and really just look at the panels. And so it's like, in that sense, they can go faster than the pace that you intended for them. And in like the opposite way, like I had said, they can linger longer than you intended for them, because there is that added element of pictures, where novels, unless it's an illustrated novel, which aren't very common, they don't have that. It's all just words. And all of the pictures are in your mind. And it's more of a passive experience, I guess, to read a novel than it is to read a comic. So, with that out of the way, I wanted to talk about how you can control the pacing and or make your comic scene be better paced by like page by page techniques. So I'm not really going to talk about an entire story pacing, because I think that when it comes to getting really, really broad and really, really general with comic tips, you're getting less and less, you're getting farther away from specific comic things and getting more into just storytelling things. And when it comes to storytelling things, you can find someone who is much, much more clear and really thought about like story elements and story pacing more than I have. And story pacing really comes down to how you have written the script, how many scenes, how many chapters, how you've dealt with the passage of time, not just over the course of the story, but over the course of a scene or a chapter. That's all in the script. So I wanted to talk about page, like the art things that you can do to slow down your pacing or pick your pacing up if it's one or the other that you want to change in your story. If you see, if you see that your scene is going by slower than what you wanted it to be. So if your scene, as an example, is a conversation, and it's not an especially long-winded conversation, but it is like a full conversation between two or more characters, and you're thumbnailing or you're revising your script and you're thinking about how many pages it would take for this whole scene to play out, and you're thinking that this is way too many pages. One thing that is like the best thing to do when you want to pick up the pace is not just condense your conversation, but also make more of the conversation happen on a single page. Take out, maybe if you've put in a lot of beat panels that have no conversation, that have no dialogue, but are like a silence panel, or a panel that like indicates that they're like a character is contemplating in silence or something, you know. Take out as many of those that you have that wouldn't confuse the reader, because obviously if you've put them in, you have some sort of justification for it, so taking out all of them wouldn't make sense, and would probably detract from whatever your mood you're trying to set. But having silence, having pauses, having beats between dialogue definitely slows down the pace. Think about it in like watching a movie and there's like dialogue, there's a conversation between like two witty characters and it's really fast paced and it's like jump cut, jump cut, jump cut from one person to the other as there's like hardly a breath between their responses to each other. And having your page include more dialogue creates that same sense of back and forth, because if it takes longer for a person to go from the top of one page to the bottom of another page. Now this sounds contradictory, but just bear with me. If it takes them longer to go from the top of one page to the bottom of the same page, in their mind, they will perceive all of the dialogue that had happened on that page as going by quicker, because pages and panels hold a certain kind of space in our minds. And that space isn't really like malleable. I don't know if that's the exact word, but it's we expect to read a page in a certain amount of time. And so if a conversation is supposed to be fast-paced, then making the distance between when the dialogue takes place, like shortening that distance, will make it feel like it's going by faster. And that sounds so like contradictory, like, oh, like make them take forever to finish a page and that speeds up the pace, but it does, because we perceive how long it takes to finish a comic book. Let's say it's like a graphic novel, like a physical one. We perceive how long it takes to finish that by how many times we go from one page to the next. So even if it's the same exact number of speech bubbles and panels, if there's more panels and more speech bubbles on a page, there's less pages, and we'll perceive it as having gone by faster. It's like, yeah, it's something that you really gotta think about. Not necessarily you gotta think about it in order to get it, because that's not what I'm trying to say, but it is something that on, like, when you first hear it, you're like, your instinct is to think, no, I think that's the opposite, but then you really think about it and you're like, huh, I guess. Contrary to that, if you want to, not contrary, basically opposite of that, if you want to slow down the pace, make whatever slow-paced moment of your scene that you want to be slow-paced, make that happen over multiple pages. Because, once again, the amount of times we flip the page means that it feels like time is passing. Basically. Oh, I just thought of something that really explains this. Okay. So, if any of you guys are familiar with D&D, when you're in a battle, no matter how long it takes a player and the game master to discuss what a player does during that round, the round is always 6 seconds long. Always. From the beginning of the round to the end of the round, no matter if it takes 20 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes for every player to have taken their turn, it will always be in-game 6 seconds have passed. So it's kind of like that. It's like, it doesn't matter how many word bubbles or how many speech bubbles, how many narrative boxes, how many panels you have. A page will always be 6 seconds of time in story. And so if you want to slow down the pace, you have less things happen within those 6 seconds, less panels, less speech bubbles. And if you want to speed up the pace, you have more things happening within those 6 seconds. Now, 6 seconds is just referring to the D&D round time. I have no scientific evidence of or anything to say how long a reader perceives reading a comic page to take. Like, I don't know. I can't even guess. But it's essentially like that. So, a page kind of has a fixed-ish length of time within the story. So, at risk of repeating myself over and over again, I feel like I've explained it well enough. Thinking about all that I've said now, I don't have anything else to say, and if I just keep going, I will just be repeating the same things that I've already said over and over and over again. So, I hope that helped. Anyone trying to control the pace of their scenes, just like a quick overview. If you want the pace to be faster, make more things happen within a page. And if you want it to be slower, make less things happen within a page. And the definition of things here could be panels, could be speech bubbles, or it could be like actions, depending on what your scene is about, what it contains. Yeah, so that is all that I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.